So when it comes to the Bible, there are a lot of different ways that churches approach it. And in a lot of churches, you would be told that the Bible is a divinely inspired book handed to humanity to reveal to us absolute truths about the nature of God and our relationship to Him, and Him very specifically. And you would be told that as such, the Bible and its contents are entirely unique in the history of the world. In a lot of churches, that is the party line. And so, in that kind of church, what you definitely would not be told is that Psalm 104, this soaring hymn of praise that I just read for you, a hymn that celebrates God's power and might, a hymn that extols God's grandeur and majesty, a hymn that praises God as the creator of all that is and all that was and all that ever will be. What you would not be told is that Psalm 104 began its life some 1,000 years before the book of Psalms was compiled, and it began its life as a hymn of praise not to the God of Israel, but to the Egyptian god of the sun, Aten. And to be perfectly clear here, I'm not saying that this psalm is vaguely similar in structure to an Egyptian hymn that came before it. I'm not saying that it uses language in a similar way, so there might be a connection there. What I'm saying is that they are line for line the same. You can find it inscribed in the tomb of a pharaoh. The only meaningful difference between the two is that the version that we find in our Bible tacks on a bit of traditional Israelite prayer language at the very end. Scholars aren't entirely sure how it made its way from Egypt to Israel, but they do not hesitate to describe Psalm 104 as an Egyptian hymn in Israelite clothing. And while some churches might get out of sorts about such an origin story, I want to go out on a limb this morning and say that the fact that Psalm 104 was used and used happily by two drastically different religions more than 1,000 years apart, I want to go out on a limb this morning and say that that is actually a very good thing. Because I think that it's telling us something essential, I think. And what it is telling us, I think, is that whatever religion you practice, whatever God you happen to follow, be it Yahweh or Aten, true worship, honest worship, full-hearted worship begins with a simple acknowledgement of the vastness of God and of God's creation. Right? That is what Psalm 104 is entirely about, just standing in awe of the incomprehensible vastness of the divine. And here's the interesting thing about vastness at the scale that Psalm 104 talks about it. You cannot acknowledge vastness like that without also acknowledging at the same time our own relative smallness. The two come together as a package deal. To call God vast is to call ourselves, by comparison, small. To praise God as the maker of the sun and moon and stars and the ultimate sustainer of all life is to say in the same breath that not a single one of us, I hate to break it to you, but not a single one of us is the center of the universe. But we live in a culture, don't we, that encourages us to believe the opposite. That we are and should be the center of everything, and that our worth is best measured in how much attention we can garner, about how many clicks and likes and views we can accumulate, about how much space we can take up in a room. The more center stage we are, the better, or so our culture wants us to believe. And so against that cultural backdrop, acknowledging our smallness can feel like we're admitting failure. Perhaps it even feels like Psalm 104 is trying to knock us down a peg or two. But what I want to suggest this morning is that it's actually the opposite that's true, that acknowledging our smallness in the face of God's vastness isn't a loss or a failure. It's actually a release There's a certain amount of freedom in it. Because by acknowledging our smallness, instead of just constantly puffing ourselves up and up and up, there is simply just more room in our lives. There's more room in our lives for God. God gets to be the one that's holding everything together, not you. God gets to be the one who has it all figured out, not you. God gets to be the one who doesn't need a break, doesn't get tired, doesn't run out, not you. That's not a loss or a failure. There's a relief and freedom in acknowledging that. And at the same time, there is more room in our lives for other people when we're not just constantly puffing ourselves up. You can actually love the people around you because you are no longer competing with them for attention. You can actually enjoy their company because they are no longer obstacles on your quest to being the biggest thing in the room. Rather, they're just all other small things standing next to you in awe of the same vastness that you are. And that's why true worship, whether you are an Israelite or Egyptian, American or Canadian, begins with acknowledging God's vastness. It decenters yourself in a way that makes room in your life for God and room for the people sitting in the pews next to you. And I had a surprising experience of this just about 2 weeks ago. As some of you know, I've been away for a few weeks, and during that time, my wife Sarah and I had opportunity to get away for an anniversary excursion to Niagara Falls. It's actually just a few hours from where I grew up, but I have never been there before, so it was the first time for both of us. And so with a bare minimum of planning, we just booked a hotel room on the Canadian side because the American side is kind of sad, and we just drove out for a couple days. And because we did no planning whatsoever, not a single Google search was done about Niagara Falls, neither of us realized that Niagara Falls is an international sightseeing destination. It gets an average of 50,000 visitors, or rather 50,000 visitors every single day. That is 20 million visitors every year. So Sarah and I showed up expecting kind of a state park kind of vibe. And what we were surprised to find instead was a city-sized tourist trap. But be that as it may, once we got past all the hotels and casinos and all the gift shops, and not one but two separate Tim Hortons locations, and we made our way down to the edge of the water, that was when all the tourist trapness just kind of fell away, and the whole thing turned into something completely different. Now, the Niagara Falls aren't particularly tall, but their claim to fame is how much water flows over them. Just millions of gallons a minute crashing down, causing mist to rise hundreds of feet in the air, catching the sun and throwing rainbows across the whole gorge there. It's truly a sight to behold. But when we got down to the water, there's all these railings along the bank that keep people from falling in as they're gawking at the falls. But all along those railings, there were just thousands and thousands of people. It's just a huge cross-section of humanity, people from all over the world, and native English speakers like me and Sarah were far and away the minority there. There were folks from the Middle East, obviously Muslim, women in hijab. Others were from Israel, obviously Jewish, men with curls and wearing kippahs. For good measure, we even saw a Buddhist monk wearing his saffron robes. There were a large number of South Asian families, so likely there were some Hindus and Sikhs in the mix too. Grandmothers wearing their saris next to teenagers who were wearing Niagara Falls hoodies, purchased at the gift shops. There were a good number of East Asian visitors as well, so presumably there were some Taoists and Shintoists among us. And then there were also clusters of Europeans, and judging by their accents, there were Germans and French and some Slavic country that I couldn't quite place. So presumably there was a good number of Christians and atheists and agnostics in there as well. Every race, nation, and creed, or so it felt. And kids from all these different places, they were just kind of running around playing. Families were smiling and laughing, strangers making room for strangers so everyone could get a look. So for all the turmoil in our world right now, all the places where people who look like the people standing at their railing are at each other's throats, right? In that place, in front of that water, that much sheer, overwhelming size, peace reigned in that place and in that moment. It really, truly did. And then when we got on the Maid of the Mist, the boat that takes you right up to the falls themselves, it went even further than peaceful. Because on that boat, getting pummeled by the spray of these immense falls, the thin plastic of our disposable ponchos, the only thing keeping us from being soaked like a bunch of drowned rats, nationality, religion, and language, all of it was still there. It just didn't matter at all. We were just person next to person, small together in front of that same wall of water, 680,000 gallons a second thundering down towards us. In the presence of something so vast and powerful, the things that usually dog me day to day, my anxieties, my grudges, which are many, my long mental list of things that I'm convinced are terribly quite important, for a little bit, they got just a little quieter. Not gone, just quiet, smaller, more manageable, easier for a while just to set down. Because in the face of the vastness of the falls, I was less able to imagine myself the center of the universe. And that's the effect that acknowledging the vastness of God and God's creation has on us. But what I'm not doing is standing up here and telling you that Niagara Falls was a paradise, because later that same day, back at our hotel, a woman and her friend got out of an Uber right in front of the entrance to our hotel's parking lot. And they got out in front of that entrance and they just stood there for several minutes as me and a bunch of people behind us were waiting to turn in and get into that parking lot. And when Sarah and I rolled down the window and asked them to move, they had the nerve, the gall, the utter chutzpah to swear at us. Can you believe it? A man and woman of God, they were swearing at us. They will have a lot to answer to when they're up at the pearly gates. I will tell you that much. But I actually think that is the point, right? That woman was not standing in front of the vastness of the falls when that happened. She was standing in front of a parking lot, the center of her own universe. It turns out that the peace and spaciousness like we saw at the railings around the falls, it doesn't travel well. It's not something that you can catch once, put in a jar, and take home with you. And rather, it's something that you need to work to keep in front of you. Because it's so easy, it's so easy to lose that perspective. So while here in Greater Boston, we may not be able to have a Niagara experience every day of our lives, what we can do, what we are able to do is take a page from the Egyptians and from the Israelites after them and begin our worship and our prayer by acknowledging the sheer vastness of God, the creator of all that is, the one who made us and sustains us in all of our glory and all of our smallness. Friends, may it be so. Amen.